Okay, so Joe Root has decided to resign as England's Test captain after a historically long tenure in the role. 5 years, 64 Test matches, winning 27 of them. But as has been the case with England as a whole recently, we're very much left in this weird flux of a situation with no real idea of where they're going to go from here. No coach, no chief selector, the ECB in a total state of shambles right now. I mean, pretty much the only one who has a job of any level of solidity, I think, is Strauss. But yeah, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at who some of the leading candidates would be to fill the void that's left by Root. As there's so many being thrown about. I think I've seen some people say there's as many as 12 candidates being considered, most of which probably weren't even in the last squad for the West Indies tour. But as you can see here, I've put up the top three as I've put the contenders that I think are probably the most likely to get a look in Stokes, Bairstow and Butler, as three of the sort of stalwarts of the team right now that you're sort of, okay, I don't really see a scenario fully fit where these three aren't at least in the squad with England's rotation policy. Current outright favourite being Stokes, was Root's number two for the majority of his tenure, the most obvious leader in the side by a distance. Often relied on for on-field tactics, fielding placement. I believe Nasser Hussain, I think Atherton as well, have both sort of vouched for him, saying he's the guy that should be given it. But there's always this thing with Stokes that, one, he's got the issue of being the guy for England, where it's, he's the most popular, he is the talismanic figure in the team. Is it too much pressure on your all-rounder? He's apparently supposed to be stepping back on bowling duty, but that hasn't seemed to have been the case either. I mean, look at his bowling numbers in the West Indies tour. It was ridiculous compared to someone that was really only supposed to be used in short bursts. Some disciplinary issues, a lot of injury problems. Current favourite, but whether he's the most sensible choice is another thing entirely when you're mixing in the burden of the role as well as the strain he's already gone through, obviously with his mental health break, and then a long running number of injuries that, if you're naming a new captain, ideally you want him to be available for as long as possible, and with Stokes, at this point in his career, it's maybe a risk not worth taking. I'd say next you're probably looking at Butler. Very much been groomed as the replacement for Morgan with the white ball captaincy, so whether they sort of go, hey, Morgan's doing alright for now, maybe take the red ball and see how it goes. High profile, well liked, weirdly 9th on the Sky Bet odds rankings, which I found obscenely low for someone that's as trusted and as tenured as Butler. That as I said, he's a vice captain with the white ball team for quite a while now. Long expected to be the man to take over there. So again, just looking at from my perspective, I would say I'd put him very much in the likely category. And then Johnny Bairstow is really at this point one of few guaranteed starters. Hundreds against Australia, and I believe against the West Indies. Wide range of experience, white ball, red ball, franchise. 6th in the odds, so higher than Butler. Possibly, the safe pair of hands. Wicketkeeper going to be in the game, whether they actually give him the gloves or not. Reliable, been there for a long time. At this point, probably one of the more likely middle order batters. That he seems a reliable option, if not the most inspiring. So yeah, I'd definitely put them as the three most likely. In my view, between they're experienced, they've pretty much toured everywhere, more than likely going to be integral in part of the rebuilding up until the next Ashes, which is presumably what the new coach is going to come in and build towards. You would say that within 18 months' time, by the time that comes around again, or 12, 18 months, whatever it is, that they would likely all still be around, fitness permitting. So yeah, I'd say sort of top tier, I would go Stokes, Butler, Bairstow, not of who I would give it to, but who I think they would be the most inclined to lean toward. Right, so I've sort of put together a second tier here then, which I've sort of just dubbed the outsiders, as guys who are legitimately possible, but sort of a bracket down from the three that I believe would be the most likely candidates for the job in Root's absence. Sam Billings, I'll go at first. Only played the one test match, but has plenty of international white ball experience. So he's not totally new to the England setup. Showed very much that he's ready, willing, and able by dropping everything in the Big Bash to come in for the one test match he did get in Australia. But I do like him as a candidate. Super proactive, very chirpy, massive contrast to Joe Root's captaincy style, which towards the end just became so stale and passive and negative that really it sort of left a lot of people wondering why it took him this long to cave in the end, whether it's just saw the writing was on the wall. But with Billings, I don't think you're ever really going to get that from his captaincy that won Kent the T20 Blast. You saw this side of just this sort of really proactive chop and change things, right? That's not working, try something new, throw that out. And to the point where it almost became like sort of, okay, I'm less paying attention to what everything else is going on. What are you going to tell people to do next? And that I do think that is something that could be a step too far in a way, but that at this point, after what we've gone through, I mean, Cook was a defensive captain. Root was ridiculous at times. I mean, some of the fields he was setting for people, like Jack Leach especially, there was never any proactive, aggressive spin bowling encouraged. It was always, right, 4 or 5 guys out in the boundary, big leg side field, just hold him at bay and try not to cause us to get thumped here. And yeah, as a spinner, you're going to do that at times, but I think with Billings, you're really going to see a different side of captaincy if he got given it that would be very interesting to see, and that's why I don't think he'll get it at all, but that he is in the candidacy list on the betting odds, and I believe is currently second behind Stokes, so not someone that seems out of contention in a lot of people's minds, but someone that I really think would be behind the three I mentioned above. Next up, I'll go with Broad. Wealth of experience, as experienced as you could want anybody to be. Been everywhere, seen everything in the Test game. And at his age, could tie England over to the next Ashes if they wanted to do something really short term and maybe give a number 2 role to somebody else. But let's be honest, he's too outspoken to be offered it. The drama around him being dropped, while was ridiculous to begin with, that he wasn't included in the squad in the name of we need to try other people. Look, outside of just the parody of the reviews that will be wasted within the first couple of overs of a game, it would be so un-ECB. Like Stokes is not an ECB style captain. Broad would be so far off in that direction that it's not funny. I mean, you could picture some very honest and quite outburstful interviews, and I really think it's something they just won't risk. But as experienced as he is, and with less than a month to go until the first, about 6 weeks to go until the first test of the summer, it's not out of the realms of possibility, but it's highly unlikely. Next up, Vince, raved about by one of the favourites for the head coaching job in Gary Kirsten, Hampshire captain, and he's been so fond of him that you would think if maybe he wanted to come in and immediately implement his guy that he has been raving about as captain, it's a distinct possibility. On the other side of it, hasn't played a test match since 2018, only averages 25. You would think that outside of the captaincy vacancy there would be no room for Vince in the England setup, but he sits 3rd overall in the odds, so I wouldn't want to discount him entirely, but it would be a very strange situation to drop him in for someone that, yes, has been in the England setup and I think played one-day games for England last summer against Pakistan, but having not played a test since 2018 and only averaging 25, I think that would be a very, very large reach to say that he would be the best candidate to captain. Whether he steps in, maybe behind a Broad or Bairstow, Butler, as a vice captain or something, to blood him again, to get him reintroduced to the international setup at test level, could be very possible, but I really do think it's a bit of a stretch to say Vince as a captaincy candidate. And then finally we have who was a bit of a stretch personally, as one of my personal favourite players in Chris Wokes. Experienced, well spoken, well liked, plays regularly, and I'm pretty sure he has captaincy experience with Warwickshire / Birmingham Bears over the years before he was an England regular. Would just sort of make sense. Often sent to do the media duty in Root's absence when he just wants to pawn it off on somebody, and is actually sat at the same odds as Butler right now, which would mean probably in talks at least. If the rumour of the 12 being discussed, you would presume Chris Wokes is a stable, regular presence in the dressing room would be one of those. Senior figure, as a well liked, well spoken. But yeah, as I say, it's sort of all of that added together makes for what you would think would be a fairly decent candidate in the sort of panic-stricken, we have no options, let's throw somebody at it mentality that seems to be the case right now. So while I think it's unlikely, I would definitely put him in this sort of mid-bracket of possible, but probably not going to go down particularly well. As we've seen from the way it was talked about in the West Indies tour, that people just really didn't want him on the tour. His overseas record is mediocre at best, but he's so dangerous in England, and he's so reliable and well liked that surely in a situation like this there are worse options. But yeah, that's why I'd safely put him in this middle bracket. So yeah, as I say, I think these four are all less likely than the three earlier, but I'm sure they'll be brought up in contention at least, and I don't think any Broad could swing one way or the other, but I think all of these would be sort of steady hands. Okay, and then finally I've got a pair of people that I've put into a bracket of their own, simply titled the Really? And as you can see, I've put Moeen Ali and Zach Crawley as those, as their presence in the list alone baffles me. Ali is currently 4th in the odds. Moeen Ali is 4th in the odds right now to be England's next Test captain, ahead of the likes of Wokes, Butler and Bairstow, who are all on tour with England in the past few months. Wasn't in the Ashes squad, didn't play against the West Indies in the Test tour, and hasn't played a Test match since last September. Now, this is nothing against Moeen Ali, but if you haven't been in either of the last 2 tours and have seemingly no real interest, I mean, you've heard nothing about him outside of his BT role, sort of criticising the performance, which fair enough, they were dreadful against Australia, that he wants to play Test cricket. And, again, he's at the IPL, not the Championship right now, as he's fully entitled to do. Phenomenal white ball player. But I just don't see it. And as for his presence at 4th on the list, it's like averages pretty much the same with the bat now that Wokes does, and averages, I believe, 8 more. Which, spinner, less friendly conditions, I get. But it just all sort of seems that Moeen Ali is done with Test cricket, that as I say, his presence at 4th on the list is very strange. Yes, he's a former vice-captain, and did a pretty solid job of it. But it all just looks a little strange. You wouldn't think going... Like, Broad is one thing, because he at least played in Australia, and wasn't, in the West Indies, because they were looking at other options. Moeen just hasn't been involved. Broad, I think a year older, but has been around for the while anyway, or at least would have been. Like, Moeen's taken leaves of absences, he's been just in the white ball squad for quite some time now. You would think going back to a 34, 35-year-old at this point to give them the captaincy when they haven't been in your current to recent plans would just be very strange. So as I say, I've put him in the really, through no fault of his own. It's just, if this was like 4 years ago, you'd go, okay, yeah, maybe there's time for you to get back in the setup if they really rate you as a captain. But I just think it just looks very, very weird. And to have him 4th, I believe, behind Billings, Vince, and Stokes, ahead of people who have been actively playing for England in the last 6 months, it just confuses me. So, really? And then, finally... my least favourite player right now, Zach Crawley. How? Really, that could have been, Moeen was really. Crawley is how? How is Zach Crawley in the odds currently ahead of Bairstow, Butler, and Wokes? 14 to 1. I mean, it's glaringly obvious that they're attempting to groom him as a future captain, the way he's talked about, the way he's presented, the blind faith that has been bestowed upon him by media members and coaching and teammates, despite his best efforts to be pretty awful at times. I mean, he's averaged 10 over a calendar year with the bat and is ahead of Bairstow, Butler, and Wokes in terms of odds on to become not just a future England captain in 6 weeks' time. on a scale of awful decision making, well, by no means the worst that the ECB have done in the last 3, 4, 6 months. I don't know, take your pick. It wouldn't be the worst. It would be pretty stupid. I mean, he is probably more deserving to be in a question of whether he should be in the touring squad or in the next test squad for the home series this summer than he should be. Never mind whether he should be a potential captain for England in 6 weeks' time. It's unbelievably daft. But yeah, first class average of 30, when a calendar year averaging 10 and was deemed the future and undroppable and the one surefire opener England have. How? I don't know. And really a potential captaincy candidate this summer? No. So yeah, those are pretty much all the candidates that come to mind anyway, or at least that, I wasn't going to bring Jimmy up because he's 39 and I really doubt that he would be included, but of all the ones there, I think the top three sort of separate themselves based on availability, consistency, presence in the dressing room, likelihood to be involved moving forwards. The middle bracket there, I think, are long shots or just haven't been around long enough to really warrant being fully in the discussion. And then these two, one I just don't think is that interested in Test cricket moving forward, and Crawley is just it's ridiculous. But anyway, if it were me, I would say Stokes would be an un-ECB like decision, but in the situation they're in, is probably what they'll do. Out of the Peterson thing, or Freddie getting given a go. We've got no other option. Let's give it to the most popular guy. Butler and Bairstow, the sort of safe pair of hands thing. They'll be around, so why not? Personally, I would love to see Sam Billings get given it. Proactive, chirpy, a total contrast to everything that's been around this England setup for quite some time. I think it would be a real breath of fresh air into the squad. But hey, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think anyway. It'd be interesting to see sort of polling people here of what people think would make the best option. Be great to hear. Like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, let me know if you want some more England cricket ranting / venting. But yeah, until then, see you next time.